Welcome to another episode of Safe Space, the podcast for next generation family business leaders. Today, we're joined by Massimo Backus out of Seattle, Washington. Massimo, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Franco. Thank you so much. What an honor to have this conversation with you.
So, before we get started and dive into what we're going to be talking about, which is going to be really fun for both of us, can you share with the audience a little about you, your background, family business, and then we'll get into it?
Yeah, as you said, I'm live in Seattle. I was born and raised here. Professionally, I run an executive coaching and leadership development firm. I'm also part of a multi-generational family business and a family foundation. And over the course of my career working in leadership development with executive teams, I've erred towards a focus on the value of self-compassion as a practice and trying to debunk the myths about what seems to be uh, at face value a soft skill and maybe something that would be a sign of weakness, but to present the research to inform people that it is actually a great source of resilience. And in this increasingly complicated, chaotic time that we live in that's going faster and faster, we need to be able to sustain ourselves, and we need to be able to find the resources internally to do that. We can't be solely reliant on others or the external world to kind of feed and nourish us.
So, you said you come from a family business. So, how did you growing up in a family business guide you towards your career today?
I've been reflecting on this a lot because there were times where um, it created opportunities for me to work at a young age and just understand work ethic. That's certainly something that I learned very much from my dad. Um, it also presented opportunities to show me what I don't want to do, meaning the family business wasn't something that I felt called to. Um, I think there's a huge privilege that I've had to know that it's there, that it was a backup plan, that if I manage to fail at everything else in life, I could find a job, in the family business, which I don't take for granted at all. I think that's a huge privilege, especially as an entrepreneur. Um, it's also been something that has, created interesting tension and challenges, within the family dynamic. And for myself, I think growing up, how do I individuate? How do I set myself apart? How do I prove that I can be successful on my own while also not um, disrespecting the privilege that I've grown up with?
Brené Brown talks about, one of our basic human needs is belonging. At the same time, we want to be independent. And in a family business, that is a tough um, wall to manage, to navigate, because you're part of, but at the same time, you want to prove yourself, have your own self worth, but you're attached to this thing, this behemoth that in some cases has a lot of history behind it. How did you navigate that?
I don't know exactly where the clarity struck, but I realized that the belonging for me was to belong to the family, not the business.
Mm.
Um, and even in my involvement with our family foundation, I stepped off the board for a number of years because I realized that they were in conflict. And my involvement with the foundation uh, was maybe giving me belonging there, but it was taking away from my belonging to the family members, and that was a priority for me. And so, over the last several years, my focus has been to find belonging in those relationships, and to see what is it about each family member that I can appreciate, because the love is there. With family, I love these people. I might not always like them, but who are
Yeah.
they? What can I appreciate about them? And there's a blessing to having history with someone, to experience the parts of your childhood with somebody that other people, didn't get to experience. And so I cherish those relationships now, but for me, I had to be deliberate about separating those two. I couldn't hold belonging in both and hold both roles at the same time. I found that really challenging.
So, just, I understand what you're saying. Just let's break it down for the listener,
Yeah.
right? So how did you realize, because, you belong to this ecosystem, which is, family and business and ownership and philanthropy all into one, there's it in a box. How did you know that I need to belong to just one section in this box versus the entire piece? How did you see that? And then what were the specific steps that allowed you to say, okay, I'm gonna maybe disassociate from one to belong to the other, because if I try to do both, there's gonna be conflict.
About 10 years ago, I was the president of the board for our family foundation. And in my line of work, I diagnosed the team dynamic. And I thought, well, let's bring in a practitioner, a facilitator, and a coach to help uh, create the conditions for the conversations that needed to happen about trauma and wounds, and how people were feeling about things, to get beyond just the kind of cyclical tension that was happening, the same dynamics playing over and over, the same patterns. And while that worked for a short bit, everything dissolved very quickly. And that was disheartening to me. I thought, well, if I can't offer my expertise here and help, and what role am I providing? What value am I providing? Am I doing anything here on the board that someone else couldn't do? Um, and what's the cost of me staying? And I realized the cost was, it was eroding relationships with these people that are my family, these people that I love. And personally, I put that as a higher priority to what the foundation was doing. I thought someone else could occupy this seat. There's another family member, another person that could be in the seat as president, and lead the board. Maybe I can do more by investing in the relationships outside. Maybe I can be more effective in helping to heal relationships between people, including myself, by not being in the system, but being, at least outside that system, or staying within the system of the family dynamic. And that's where I've, you know, focused the work. And I'll give you an example, Frank, of what that looked like. Uh, One of the people I had a great amount of tension with for many years was my dad. And we uh, had one of those kind of crucible moments where we're either not going to talk to each other anymore, or we're going to figure this out. And we ended up going to, I joke, a couples counseling together for several months to work on our relationship. And um, my only goal coming out of that was to have a better relationship with my dad. The upside, the thing that makes me so happy, is that it's improved his relationship with everyone in his life, because it was the first time in his life that he started to learn about his inner experience, his trauma, the feelings that he was having, to be able to name them and understand them, and what was the unmet need that they were speaking to. And so while our relationship is so much better as a result, I think that his life is better. I think he um, is more present as a result of it. And I couldn't have done that if I was trying to do it within the system of the board. It's too loaded.
So, couple questions here. Like the first one is, the level of emotional awareness and clarity and mindfulness that you had to come to that decision didn't come overnight.
No.
What was the so if we're talking, if there's a listener that's listening and they're going, wow, that sounds really cool. I'd like to learn how to have that superpower, right? What's the first step that I take to eventually have an opportunity to have that level of awareness and mindfulness? That's question number one. And before I forget, because I'm getting old, I want to give you question number two. Is What was the driver to say, you know what, I need to do work with a couples counselor with my dad? Because as I said, you were a crossroads. We're not going to talk again, or we're going to get better. So what's the pieces that I need to go this way, which is the couples counselor versus the let's forget about it. So those are the questions.
Well, I'll start with the second question first, because that really speaks to the driver behind it, which was, um, we lived close to each other, and we were about to live even closer. I bought a house that was essentially behind my parents' house in the same neighborhood. And uh, a younger version of me would have thought that's crazy. You never want to live next to your parents. But I always thought, wouldn't it be great if we, kind of had this compound between our two places and a trail or a staircase that could connect it, and my son could go see his grandparents whenever he wants, and to have a close relationship with them. And so it was something that my wife and I were really excited about. But I also realized if we're going to be neighbors like this, we need to
Yeah.
make sure we have a very strong relationship, and boundaries, and can communicate with each other, because it's going to be painful if we're, not talking to each other, but we live next door. So that was the driver. Um, and you're right, it didn't happen overnight. For me, I tried several times to have conversations and approach it with um, compassion and kindness and curiosity, but I would end up getting triggered by these things beyond my own expertise, because it's the dad son dynamic, which is even harder than any other, relationship. And so I had to step back, and we didn't talk for a few months. And, during that time, I wrote a lot. I was journaling a lot about what was going on. What did I want him to know? Not to hurt him, not to distance him from me, but to really let him understand how I was experiencing our relationship, and what I understood about him that maybe he didn't understand about himself. How I could empathize with his own upbringing, and how there's multi-generational trauma that gets passed down, and that I wasn't pointing the finger or criticizing, but that I was trying to empathize and say, you know, you're not alone in this. Nevertheless,
Yeah.
we have to work on this, and I want to work on it together. I'm not saying you're broken and you need to fix yourself, and say, hey, let's work on this together. Um, and I ended up writing him a letter, and I dropped it off at his house, and he called me a few days later and said, okay, can we talk? And we slowly worked our way back. Um, and then as the construction process was coming to a completion with this house, uh, so I think that therapy would be the best thing to do. And he agreed, because we realized we weren't equipped to be able to have the conversation on our own. Um, and I was willing to humble myself and say, it doesn't matter how many degrees I have in psychology, or how many books I've written, or, this is above my pay grade, this dynamic. And what we were looking for is, could somebody offer us a common language, so that when things did surface, we could identify it as, hey, here's the third entity of our relationship. This isn't you. This isn't me. This is something in our dynamic. And can we talk about it in a constructive manner that, um, both my dad and I are notoriously defensive people. So you put two defensive, like expert level defensiveness, together, and it's just a bomb every time. And so what are the frameworks that we could use to uh, normalize things, and soften them, so that neither of us got defensive, and we could both operate with curiosity. Um, and it's still, to this day, it's a daily practice. It's a regular kind of check-in, like, hey, how are we doing? Anything on your mind? Anything that I need to know about? Um, so it's taken time.
So what I'm hearing is there was a genuine curiosity and a desire to heal, right? Because without those two, it's very difficult to transform and to develop mindfulness.
It is. It takes the practice of mindfulness in the moment to catch it, and allow the space to. Um, I'm triggered right now. What's the gun loaded with? What's triggering me here? What is my experience? I think about our emotions as data, because we can have feelings about our feelings very easily, and that's a slippery slope. And we can also prioritize. Well, I like being happy, but I don't like being sad. So we start to judge our emotions, or I have a lot of clients that feel like they can't be angry. That's just something I can't do. It's like, but anger is an emotion. It has a purpose. It has value. But if you just look at our emotions as data, and you go, I'm feeling angry. Okay, great. That's information. What is that information telling me? I'm upset about something. what flavor of anger is it? Am I feeling rejected? Am I feeling unseen? Am I feeling unheard? What's the flavor of this data? And then you can understand what is the underlying unmet need. You know, I'm a big student of the nonviolent communication framework, and understanding what that unmet need is. Then I have personal accountability to say, well, I get to do something with that. I can share that. I can say, hey, here's a need that I have, and maybe the other person is able to uh, address that, and maybe they're not, but just that they know that that's a need that I have. There's so much value in them just understanding that I'm coming from a place of not having my needs met. Which
It's
gets to
interesting.
another thing in our culture, Franco, where especially with men, no one wants to be needy. So even the idea of developing a practice of being able to identify what that need is, it feels so foreign. And yet we're all needy. I mean, as human, we have needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like it is what we are. You know, it is to be human is to have needs, and to be human is to want to provide for other people to meet their needs, and also to want our needs to be met. That's humanity. That is it in a nutshell.
So let's talk about mindfulness. Let's talk about, that ability to just be in that split second from event to the thought to the feeling to the trigger to the reaction, right? So share with the audience what it's like to be able to just hit pause for 2 or 3 seconds, which seems like a long time when you're in that, yeah, right? To go, oh, trigger, wound, old behavior, new choice. Share with the audience what it's like to be on that field of that level of awareness and mindfulness.
So I use a framework that I've developed, and I talk about in detail in my book, Human First, Leader Second. And it's three A's. It's awareness, acceptance, and accountability. And so awareness is that first step of being open and curious of what am I feeling right now? And just being able to sit with it and not judge it. And
And
that
sorry, that's the
is,
key. Listen, audience, not judge it. It's just a feeling.
it's just a feeling. You can't be curious and judgmental at the same time. So you got to let go of judgment, and you just get curious about it. And because you're not judging it, you're like, well, is it sadness? Is it anger? Is it disgust? Um, what again? What is the flavor of that? Um, Brene Brown has a book called Atlas of the Heart that is basically the dictionary of emotions. It's
Yeah.
brilliant. Um, and so when I'm talking about flavors, like going to the ice cream shop, there's a lot of flavors. Her book helps us to understand and develop a fluency to know what are the different emotions. And the more granularity we have around it, the more informed we are. So that's the first thing. And I get curious about it because feeling is a part of life. It's actually one of the joys of life. And as someone who's dealt with depression, I know what it's like not to feel. I much prefer feeling, even if they're not good feelings. There's an aliveness to it, and that's what we're on earth to do, is to be alive. So you can lean into it to go, what is this telling me? The awareness is the first step. Acceptance is the second step, which is what's the reality of this? Not what do I want it to be? What do I wish it is? But what's the acceptance? The acceptance could be I threw out an idea and everybody didn't agree with me. And I felt stupid in that moment. And then I felt rejected. And so acceptance is, yeah, that's a human experience. When I share an idea and it's not adopted by everybody, it's not uncommon to feel rejection, and rejection doesn't feel good. That's a shared experience that all people have, right? Um, we don't know each other well, Franco, but I imagine in your life at some point you have felt that because you're human, right? For no other reason. It's not a sign of someone's success or capability. It's just a sign of their humanity. So because we're stepping into it from this place of, okay, I accept that this is where I am at, then we can start to address what can I do about this? And I'm a proponent of everything comes down to personal accountability. I'm responsible for my feelings, no one else. Now, if someone's doing something to hurt me, I'm responsible to say something to them about that. But it is my responsibility. It's not um, just the external world that's doing it to me, right? So when we get into accountability, it's about what's the action that we need to take. And it could be, I'm not in a position to have this conversation right now. So I think this should end. Um, it could be saying the courageous thing that you've been afraid to say. It could be telling the person just, hey, here's how I'm feeling right now. Not say you made me feel this way, but this is the experience that I'm having right now. What do you make up about that? Or what's your reaction when you hear that this is how I'm feeling right now? And invite, in the conversation. And the beauty of this is it's like any practice in life. The more you do it, the more natural it becomes. And it doesn't need to take, 5 minutes. It doesn't need to be some big performative thing. It could just be something that you do regularly throughout the day. It's like regular kind of hygiene. We got to breathe. We got to drink water. And in my opinion, I think we got to practice, our emotional fluency.
So, why do you think more people don't take on this practice? Why do you think more people don't get on the path of, you know, personal development, personal awareness, mindfulness, consciousness? Because at the end of the day, we all want that level of emotional intimacy, that level of open, transparent, safe communication. We all want that. We long for it, actually. In your opinion, why don't most people do it? What are they so afraid of?
I might be oversimplifying here, but I think it comes down to two things. One, either they don't know, they're disassociated, distracting, um, suppressing, whatever that is for so long that they've never even thought that you could name it. It's
Yeah.
just, this is
It's
the
their
way I've
normal.
always,
It's what they
this
know.
is
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah.
Or they are aware and it is terrifying to do anything about it. Where do I begin? How could I possibly tell this person how I'm feeling? It's so scary to be seen in that way. What, a lot of this stems from, will I be rejected? Am I going to be, kicked out of the clan in some form or fashion? And that can be really scary, especially if you're in an environment where you don't think that those other people are equipped to respond in a compassionate way. And so
And
it
that
stays internal.
and that, you know, just grows exponentially in the context of a family business. When there's family dynamics, family history, the pressures of business, the pressures of affluence and money and visibility, and it just magnifies. So how we so if the listeners are listening here, they're going, wow, that'd be really cool to be able to do that. What would be a first step? Like, how do they start? How does one start to say, I would like what Massimo and Frank were talking about. How do I how do I start to develop that muscle? How do I start to go to the emotional awareness gym when I'm terrified of it? How do I do it?
Yeah, the first step is to start with yourself. So to not say, I read this book and now I'm going to take it to the board and we're all going to do it together.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
that'll go over well.
um, I had spent years and years working on myself, studying psychology, working with a therapist before I went to my dad and said, hey, let's work with a therapist together. So one of us was already in a better position to support the other person. If we were both at the same level, I don't know that it would have worked as well. And um, part of what happens, especially in family businesses and family dynamics, is that people have tried this before. They've been hurt before, and they said you hurt me, and it didn't go well. And so they develop a learned helplessness. So people stay in their kind of corners. I'm going to keep my distance from this person, or I have a belief system about another person, and so I'm always going to disconnect whenever they start talking, or override the decision, or agree with them, whatever it might be. So the first thing is it needs to be a personal practice, and that could be, uh, reading your books, reading your new book, reading my book, listening to podcasts. There's an abundance of information out there. I mean, this body of research, this body of knowledge is um, normalizing so much in our society now. You know, even the idea of mindfulness 25 years ago was kind of
Ooh,
fringe,
yeah, a little
and
woo-woo, a little
right,
out there.
and now I think it's very much, you know, in the zeitgeist. Um, the issue I take with it is I see people learn just enough to think that they're fixed, and then
Yeah.
they go around and they try and fix other people, or they can weaponize it. Any of these concepts can be weaponized, any of them. And that's why I always say it's about personal accountability. The only person you're really responsible for is yourself. Can you apply it to yourself? And the beauty is when you do that, others will get curious.
Yes, they
I,
become drawn
I
to it.
say
They
that again.
become very magnetic.
I think it is. I think it is. But it's not when you're, you know, pushing on people. The reason I wrote my book is because I had my own practice of self-compassion, and I had so many clients asking me about it. They wanted to learn more. And at that time, so much of the literature and most of the books were written in a very soft kind of pastel color, wooey, you know, I'm wearing a lot of crystals kind of tone. And I work with, you know, corporate leaders that I don't know that that would have resonated with them. And so I thought, well, let me add to this conversation by bringing another voice in to talk about the value of this practice. Um, and with those that you feel really close with, share it with them, but not to teach them, but to share what you're learning. Hey, I've developed this practice. I'm learning about my own emotions, whether it be through journaling or what the practice is. And here's what I'm experiencing. Here's what I'm learning about what I'm resisting in life, which is so powerful. Here's what I realize is an underlying fear that I have with the family dynamic, or the reason I don't speak up in meetings, the reason why I don't say what my unmet needs are, or set boundaries. You know, but if you can do that with someone that's safe and you're just sharing your experience without them having to do anything, without any expectation, say, I just want to share what I'm learning here. It starts to become a little bit safer to take that transformation that's happening internally and, you know, share it with others.
So tell us about your book. Tell us what the book's about. You shared where you wrote it. So what's it about, and where do people find it?
So it is about this very simple concept that um, we typically treat ourselves far worse than we treat other people. And for many of us, it's just kind of the way we've always done it. And for some of us that have become successful, they attribute their success to the fact that I've been hard on myself. You've probably heard this before, Frank. Oh, I'm harder on myself than anybody else. People almost say that as like a badge of honor, which is really silly when you think about it. Like, why on earth would we want to be hard on ourselves? What benefit does that serve? Um, and so just this simple idea of what would it be like to have a practice of self-kindness? And the book starts with debunking the myths that people have, because there's a kind of a off-putting response to that. You know, even when I say it, some people may roll their eyes, like a practice of self-kindness, yuck. Which, by the way, I was one of those people.
Right.
Um, you know, and I was really hard on myself, and hence why I was so defensive. But I wasn't able to change that behavior, change that pattern that was well worn, that was learned from generations, until I developed a practice of self compassion. And then I was able to let that go because I realized I'm defending because I don't think I'm enough, which I think is a very common experience for people. I'm not enough, or I'm not enough until I have this much money, or that car, or that house, or that partner, and then I will be. And so we're constantly chasing um, and overlooking the, you know, the beautiful life that we have right now. Um, and so the book is essentially a roadmap to develop this practice, and it's a very activity based book. You were talking about what are the different ways people can do this. There's a whole variety, and I think about it as I bring all these different practices together, and it's like you and I are cooking in the kitchen. And as we're cooking, we might go, hey, this dish needs a little bit more salt. Maybe it needs a little more spice. Maybe it needs a little more acid, a little more fat, whatever it is to your particular taste buds. And that's why I want to offer people different practices. For some people, journaling is great. For other people, they hate it. Uh, for me, I've tried meditation. It doesn't really work for me, but walking does. So I go on walks regularly, and that is my form of meditation. Whatever works for people. Again, it all comes back to like there's no judgment. And I'll tell you, as the books come out, and I've done kind of the whole podcast, circuit and whatnot, I feel like we live in a society where we're inundated by people telling us what we're supposed to do to optimize our lives. Everybody's an expert, and everybody's telling you, you know, do this, eat that, sleep this many hours, optimize, optimize. And the reality is we're all different. And so people got to try different things and do what works for you. And if it works for you, great. Don't worry about what someone else is doing. That's self-kindness. You're like, well, who am I? What would honoring my own values look like as opposed to, um, trying to follow this expert schmuck, myself included?
So we've come to the top of the show, as I knew we would in a blink. Um, so if we could summarize everything and take, your experience, your journey, your learning with your father, your learning in your practice, and your learning and wisdom that you share with your clients. What's one piece of advice you could offer the current generation, and what's one piece of advice you can offer the next generation?
This is easier said than done, um, but truly seek to understand.
Mm.
There's um, there's a concept called the ladder of inference by Chris Argyris, and simply the idea is that we um, can only select a subset of data that's out there in the world. There's so much information, so we select a subset of that data, and we make up a story about that, and then that story becomes a belief. And we don't even know that we're driven by beliefs about people, and they're all over the place. This person likes this. This person doesn't like this. Those are beliefs. Maybe that's true. Maybe it was once true. Is it still true? And so, how are our beliefs framing our perspective? And I think that um, generations have beliefs about the other generation, and those beliefs need to be checked by really seeking to understand. Um, because one generation may offer something and the other generation doesn't respond in the way that they expected. And so they make up a story about they're disinterested. And it's like, no, maybe they're in their 30s and 40s and raising young kids, and you're in the 60s and 70s and you're a different stage in life. And so maybe it's about priority or time management or their availability as opposed to their interest or desire. But if you jump up that ladder and go to that belief that they're disinterested, then you've shut down the conversation as opposed to, again, hey, I noticed that I thought there was going to be response A and I got response B. Help me understand. And if you can just throw the help me understand, here's my observation, here's my need, help me understand. I I think those really scary conversations become less scary, and people less spend less time in a story that is not true.
Love it. Love it. Massimo, so if people want to find out about you and your practice and your book, how do they find you?
MassimoBackus.com, on LinkedIn and the other socials, as the kids say. And my book is called Human First, Leaders Second: How Self-Compassion Outperforms Self-Criticism. And Franco, I just want to thank you. As someone who has been in these ecosystems, for my whole life, um, I wish that my family had found, the work that you're doing 30 years ago. It is so needed, and there's a lot of hurt out there, um,
Yeah.
and it it breaks my heart because I know it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. 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 I still have to meet a family that says, you know what, we don't want to heal. We don't want to, we don't want to rebuild the bridges. I still got to meet those people. I've met them. The challenge is they just don't know how to. They're just stuck in in the land of familiar, and this is the way it is, and there's, it's like they've given up hope, right?
Yeah, I think it does become hopeless.
Yeah.
The want may always be there, but the effort it takes is
Yeah.
significant.
Massimo, thank you so much. Been an absolute honor and a privilege. Appreciate your wisdom, love your um, just your clarity and your mindfulness, and thanks for sharing with the audience.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
So, audience, as our guests donate their time and their wisdom as a way to contribute to you, right? And we've created this podcast as a form of community because we recognize that it can be a lonely place being part of a family business. And here gives a chance to, plug in, check in, here's some experiences, give you some things to think about, maybe some tools. So if anything that Massimo and I shared today really spoke to you, just drop us a note, drop us a comment, reach out to Massimo and learn more about what he does and his book. Uh, Most importantly, though, share the podcast, share the show because we all want to be part of community. We all want to belong. And let's keep growing that community. So Massimo, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much.